Meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please, Mitch?
Elton,
Here.
Nystrom,
Here.
Steven,
Here.
Pritchard,
Here.
Melhouse.
Here. Okay, I don't see anything about having to approve this agenda, so we've only got two things on it. First, the architectural contract. Julie, if you can tell.
Yeah. So you should have the architect's contract there. Our attorneys have had an opportunity to go through it and find details. So I'm confident in recommending that we approve the architect contract as it's stated.
Okay, any questions for Julie or for anyone else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the contract as written.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Mrs. Stephen to approve the architectural contract for DLR. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next is the return to learn plan update, which
Yeah,
these
so,
statistics keep changing every hour. I'll let Julie start off here.
okay, I was just going to say that our original intent behind this meeting was to have completed what we just did, and that was going to be all this meeting was for. So I just want to make sure anyone listening understands that that was the purpose of the meeting initially. Just because our numbers went up some since last time we met, and we've had an opportunity to survey staff and the community, and be able to provide you with a few more details based on your conversation last time. I thought it would be worth your time to just discuss as a board kind of where you are now with the information that you have before us with regard to our return to learn plan and what we'd like to do going forward.
I guess I'd
Okay.
like to know before I make any comments is what do you recommend first, Julie? What would you like to do? That's my first question. And then I'll tell you what I'd like to do.
That's a really good question. I don't know. So I think that my main concern comes after Thanksgiving. And I'm concerned with the number of quarantine students that we have. They're healthy students, but I know the strain that it's putting on, especially our secondary teachers. But that's something, that is one of the reasons why I asked the principals to be present, because I think they could speak to that better, because they're in those buildings and are having those conversations directly with the staff. So I just wanted to be able to have the conversation, and I'm not sure what the right answer is, Pat, honestly, but I'm nervous about after Thanksgiving. That's my biggest concern.
I agree totally with that. And my recommendation, this is just purely looking at the numbers and looking at the survey data that you provided, noting that over 68% of parents wanted either a hybrid or online, and a huge majority of teachers wanted hybrid or online. That I think that starting 2 days prior to Thanksgiving would be the 2 days for prep. And then after Thanksgiving, we should put in a request to go online for the 2 weeks. Because we've got so many people, families traveling, not getting tested because they want to travel and see family. We don't know what's going to happen. The numbers keep rising. They're not going to go down after Thanksgiving. They're going to go up. And if we can do at least 2 weeks, I think it would ease some of the tension the teachers have and some of the tension the parents have. That's my opinion.
Something that we did not anticipate when we did the survey, and I don't really have a way to tease this part out, is that in looking at some of the comments, it was evident that some of our families that are online only from the beginning also filled out the survey, and our intent had been to have the on-site families fill it out because they're the ones that are actually on site. So what I can't figure, what I can't figure out from the survey information is how many of those families, because we did have it as anonymous, were already online that chose online. So that's the only caveat that I would have with the family survey data, is that just because there were some comments that made it very clear that they were already online. I just want to put that out there just so that everyone's aware. If you have, I mean, the survey closed last night. So the idea that you've had an opportunity to read through all of those things is probably pretty small. So I just wanted to let you know that I think that's something that did happen that was unintentional on our part.
Also, I think that we have to look here too. The way you read those statistics, Pat, we can say either way. To say that 55% want either online or hybrid. Well, if you take that online versus remain fully in sight, you're up to 65%. And if you look here, the bottom line is staying hybrid versus, I'm sorry, staying fully on site versus going to hybrid. It's an equal split.
I don't think you can look at it just that way, because it's not only the online parents that filled that out. We know that for a fact. There are other people too. So
Yeah,
you have to combine the online and the hybrid together.
But if you combine the online and hybrid, you also have to combine the online and remaining fully on site too, which is what we're doing right now. So it's the statistics basically is we can make them say whatever. It's pretty close as far as hybrid versus staying on site. So unfortunately, you know, from a public health standpoint, my biggest concern is having enough faculty. The student body, you know, we're still staying around 1.5, 2. There was a study out of New York City recently that showed that kids in school were actually fairly low risk for carrying the disease. And the other thing is that as of a couple of weeks ago, all the cases we had within the faculty were traced to someplace other than getting it at school. And the coronavirus is out there in everything that we are doing. You want to talk about risk of coronavirus, come sit where I am right now. My coworkers, nursing staff, paramedics, respiratory therapists, they've really got it tough. I think most people, every job, I mean, Jeremy, his crews are out every day in houses, possible COVID. Matt's got people there at the warehouse, working out there every day trying to get our groceries here, and they're still having to do it. So I understand people's concern too about this, but right now I'm very nervous. I think we've been doing a better job with our kids online. Our kids fully in the seat. I think they're getting a better educational experience. You look at Des Moines, where they had I believe it was 57% of their high school students had D or F in one class because they're 100% online. That's scary. That's not providing them an education. Our goal here has to be providing our kids an education too. So that's the tightrope we have to walk.
I think you also have to look at the teachers though, and the number of teachers that are scared for their families. And are they doing a quality job of education when they're nervous to even go to school? You know, I think that's something you really have to take into consideration, our teachers.
Have we had trouble finding subs?
I'm gonna let my principals answer that because they know that best.
And while the principals go through that, I was wondering if they could give some insight on what it would look like in their buildings to do what Pat described on having two days of prep and then 2 weeks of online after this holiday coming up.
I would say we've been okay with finding subs for the most part. The other day we had we were a couple short, so we're having to cover with some of our teachers during their planning times, which really stretches us thin. When it comes to the online piece and doing what Pat said, that would honestly be my recommendation, is to give our teachers some time because we're converting completely over. One of the difficulties, and all of you know that I was a proponent of hybrid. One of my biggest concerns with hybrid is that it really stretches our teachers thin, where we're kind of going in and out of 3 different areas when it comes to like quarantine kids and things like that. And it's caused a stretch for our teachers. They're doing a lot. So having the couple of days to prepare, I think if we did it the way that Pat on Monday, we're prepared to train our students as to what to expect to go to online on Monday, then our teachers will be able to prep themselves and get ready for whatever's to come on the following Monday. I think our teachers would appreciate that, and I think they would handle it quite well in a transition piece.
I wanted to excuse myself because my little dog is causing problems and you might hear her in the background. I thought I could calm her down. I really believe that the safest thing we could do would be probably to do what Chris just described for our high school. We have kids at school 6-7 hours a day, and we can't control what they do outside of school. We have, families that are going to travel, that they're not taking this seriously, perhaps. But I'd like to say, if we could differentiate in any way, I have a little 2nd grade niece whose mom had to go pick her up Friday because she sat at lunch on Wednesday with a little girl who tested positive. So all of our schools have situations. But I think if we could differentiate, especially for the little kids. You're right, Brian, little kids need to stay in school and learn the basics. Bigger kids need to be responsible, and that's hard, and do their work and hopefully learn as much as they can. I'm not real concerned about grades because kids are resilient. When things get back to normal, they will do better. They will learn more. But I'm worried for our teachers. I agree. I'm worried for our teachers and all the kids that come in and out of the situation when teachers are stretched 3 different ways. So I just really feel like if we had a plan of action that can address so many issues. I understand how Julie feels because that's how I feel. And I watch it personally. And I think, we've got to be creative, but we've got to meet the needs of 2 different populations. And I really feel like our staff is really critically important. Anybody else?
I want to share. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Brad.
No, I was just going to share. I'll share kind of an opposite perspective as a secondary parent. I think it's just as important for our secondary kids to be in school. And I'm just as concerned about my sophomore being in school and learning as I am about our second graders being in school and learning. So I'll respectfully disagree with Pam that I don't see a differentiation between the 2. I also think that if we go to fully online, then we cancel all activities for our kids, which is one of the things that some of our kids live for. That's the most important thing to them in school. And I think that's a chance that we take too, that we take that away from them. And that's really important to some of those kids. Just as far as the attendance, it's ironic. I would have to tell you, this has probably been the best year for attendance we've had in my 3 years that we've been here, strangely. And I don't know if that's just because people are working to take better care of themselves. I know that's not true in every building, but as far as staff, I would have to say we have the lowest absenteeism rate that we've had in my 3 years here. So as far as moving to an online model, Autumn and Jill and I met for most of the day on Monday. And so we'd be prepared to make that transition successfully, I think our teachers would appreciate a couple of days to prepare for that transition. But we would be able to do it successfully if we needed to do that. I can tell you from our staff meeting yesterday that my staff would like to stay on site with our kids as long as it's safe, as long as we can still feel like it's safe for our kids. And that's the big question, obviously, is when is that point?
Well,
Well, I think that's,
Excuse me,
Sorry.
I just
No
want to reply to Brad. Brad, I'm in a mixed family situation. My granddaughter went back, she's a freshman, she went back second quarter because she loves being there and she's in activities that she, participates in. My grandson, who's a freshman, he thrives online and really likes it. So, the worrisome thing is when she got back to school, things started to accelerate. And then it caused a great deal of did I do the wrong thing? And now I put my kid in jeopardy from her parents. So, I agree. If we can differentiate enough, if we can isolate enough so that we do what's right for the most kids, I think that's what a hybrid plan really is. If we can keep the kids at Page, or if we can keep, one class isolated like we did, was it just Autumn, since there, was it just preschool, or was it?
no, that's my struggle, is that there is not one way to isolate it. And, I am eternally torn. I don't know what the right answer is. And when we think about our parents, 58% went on site. When we think about our teachers, I think when you say differentiate, absolutely. How do we do that though? What's our metric? What people want is different from what our numbers say one thing. What people want is another thing. What people are afraid of is another thing that we need to honor as well. And so when we think about those three things, if the numbers are really blatant that we would really differentiate different ways, then absolutely. When I look at those numbers though, 3 kids at my building is a different percentage than 10 at the high school, because my buildings are tinier, right? And I can cohort very differently than staying at the high school, also a different thing. I wouldn't say though that the staff, they're 30. When I look at that, there isn't a consistent thing that they all want either. Do we all agree our kids need to be in school? Absolutely. Like, we all know that that's best, especially with little pumpkins. When we say differentiate, I think we have to be really careful that we're using a common measurement or metric or something between the 3 buildings to ensure that our staff feel valued and honored the same way. If we're saying we're worried about staff at the high school, then we have to also be worried about staff at the other buildings. And like Brad said, over time, his staff really wants to be in the building. I think my staff is evenly split 3 ways, and we weren't that way at the beginning. But we still have a lot that really want to be on site. And we have some that when they filled out the survey, they said, if we have to do anything, I want to do this, but I really want to be on site, but they marked online. So even as we look at that survey, it's not clear cut on what we do. So I just think we have to be careful of whatever decision we make, if it's not consistent across the district, that we have to have some measure so that everybody feels valued and heard the same way.
And I agree with you completely. And that's what makes it tough.
Autumn, I was going to say the same thing earlier, in that if we want to differentiate between the buildings, it needs to be based on metrics, something that we can point to saying this is the reason why we treated this grade or this building differently. Essentially we're discriminating against staff by letting one building go to hybrid and one remaining on site or going online, telling them that because your kids are more capable or easily transition to going online, you're able to do hybrid. So I think I agree that we need to be very, very careful there. And if we want to continue to do things differently, then it needs to be based on metrics, or it's got to be a district-wide decision like Pat laid out.
One thing I didn't mention, I'm sorry, is our attendance has been pretty much similar to how it is every year. Subs are really hard to find. We've had some days that are hard, and we have some rock star associates that have their subbing license that have stepped up and saved us. But that's pretty typical every year. I would say our attendance is about the same that way. I really agree with Chris in the fact that we need that transition time, especially when I think about, 58-ish of my parents saying on-site is their preferred. We have technology issues. We have supports that we need to get in place for them. And for teacher support prints that way, they're going to need some time to prepare for that. So I do agree that cushion of support, at least for this first time we transition, is going to be really a need for our staff.
And I just want to speak on that. I think when we talk about preparing, we know there are some families that are going to need, paper packets, because it's just, we can give them a hotspot, but it doesn't work in their context where they may live. Internet access is an issue for some of our families. And so I think we have to be mindful about, if we give the teachers a day to prep or a couple days to prep, but then they don't see their kids again, we need a good plan for a way to teachers prep, and then they see their kids to be able to get that information to their kids. So I might advocate for a day and then have kids so you can get the information to the kids and make sure they're set before they leave. It's easier to do that when they're physically with you than when they're afar.
I'd like to hear from Scott, and then I'll make a couple statements.
I'd say we're probably similar to elementary in the fact that I don't want to underrepresent any of our groups. Our surveys were really the same, a third of what the method was preferred. I think when we're looking at protecting staff, I think that's a conversation that's come up since the last board meeting. I think that's been the strong sentiment that, we felt like that hybrid model was designed to protect the staff and students to be able to space people out and do that. And so whether that's the right model or not, I don't know. But I do know that from conversations for the last week and a half, that if people are upset, that's the main thing that they're upset about, that we felt like we skipped that step that was maybe in place there to protect the staff. We really talked yesterday with our staff about just like we redid our online plan, because what we designed 12 weeks ago won't work. We didn't know what it was going to look like. We didn't know what the numbers were going to look like in our schools. And after we've lived 12 weeks of it, we know if we went online tomorrow or the next day that the plan we had in place wasn't going to work for us. And so I really said, just as a board and an administrative team, we put numbers together in the middle of the summer that we had no idea what they were, what they looked like, how that was going to feel like in the schools. And so just like we changed our online plan, I said, as a leadership team, we're reevaluating what those numbers look like and what those numbers feel like. And so where we set something at, 15% community spread, in the community that might feel pretty heavy, but in the school, maybe not. And so I don't know I wouldn't advocate for any plan. Any plan you tell me that we're going to do, I could argue one side of the frustrations that we'll have from that plan. So there's really no one magic plan. We have frustrations right now with one section being online and the amount of education that they're getting. So, we talked about preparing staff, control what you can control. If at some point we decided to go online, our frustrations are going to increase dramatically, like Dr. Melhouse said, with having Des Moines having 60% of their students failing. We know that if we go online, even though it's required, we know people aren't going to participate. We know people aren't going to have access. We know a lot of work isn't going to get done. And so that's a frustration. If it's a protection and we've hit a metric that we feel like, hey, we're not safe to be here, then that's maybe worth that. Like Pam says, I want to make sure we're protecting our teachers. I think when we look at the metrics of making that decision, why, like everybody said, like Jeremy just said, if we say, hey, this building's going to do this because teachers feel a certain way and metrics are higher in another building and we don't do the same thing, that creates a big divide amongst staff that would probably not be good. So I don't know. We've been okay with teachers. I haven't been short on teachers at the middle school. We've been short on associates. we probably average 5 to 7 associates gone every day. But teachers has been, knock on wood, really good as far as teachers. And so I don't know, within that plan, I know when we went hybrid with 8th grade, that worked. It was difficult with one grade level because we were teaching in multiple levels, you know, like Chris talked about. In that plan, we're teaching online, we're teaching hybrid, you know, we're teaching in 3 or 4 different formats and trying to get kids that are quarantined and not quarantined kids. So just like online creates problems, hybrid creates problems. You know, so there's really no magic fix of what we do. I think the thing that respectively I would listen to is, like, you know, I feel the teachers want to be heard, and coming up with a reasonable number across the district of what would put us into a situation. It makes me nervous to go from we're fully on site and our numbers are really pretty good, and all of a sudden, because we feel a certain way, we're going to go to online where we may struggle. So I think that's a big jump, but if everybody feels that's the right thing to do based on a metric that we've created, I'm supportive and can support any decision that we make. And as those numbers are fluid, we have about 60 students in quarantine right now, but as of Friday, that number dropped down to about 20, you know, barring no big jumps between today and tomorrow. So as we've had some groups go in and out for certain things, and we targeted basketball a couple weeks ago where a student tested positive and decided to isolate the whole grade level of that basketball team. So that was a bigger number, but our number goes from 60 to 20, 25 in quarantined offsite without symptoms. So that number goes up and down. So what's the magic number where it moves us? I don't want to eliminate the idea of a hybrid. I know we're concerned of what people might do. We can't control what people are going to do away from school on their day off. But if that model is still open to protect teachers and space out students and give us barriers to do that, you know, I think that's something that we should still consider if that maybe needs to be the next step to make people feel safe. So just my personal thoughts. I appreciate being able to give that feedback.
Can I just
Thank
add,
you, Scott. Go ahead,
Dr.
Jill.
Mahan, can I add one thing?
Mhm.
I've read every comment on the survey multiple times, and I think that's your qualitative data. That's our desires. And it tears at your heart because there's comments on either side, but I really try to be as objective as I can and look at those metrics and look for trends and what we're seeing. And I think that's maybe the best way that we can make our decisions is what do we have for data to show what's happening with our, you know, with our district spread? What do we see happening? And I do see some trends in our data over the last couple of days that maybe mirror what might be happening in the community. I don't know where we are yet, if we're at a point, but I feel like those trends are what we maybe want to watch and focus on, because those desires in the survey are they tear you in multiple places. And I think if we can look at the data that we have in front of us, that maybe helps us to set some of those things aside.
Well,
Okay.
after listening to Scott and after listening, that's a great perception, Jill. It sounds like we've almost been doing the whatever differentiated, whatever pops up, we react to now. You know, that's how we're approaching it now, is case by case, situation by situation. And of course, none of the buildings are the same. And so if we move forward step by step with you know, certain metrics, and as the survey information said, you know, 48.6% want all buildings to do the same thing. And maybe that's, you know, that's where we're headed, and taking it one step at a time. The county numbers go up all the time. We don't know where cases are. You know, personally, many community members I know have been in the hospital or have it or whatever, that many of you would know. And it just changes. When that gets into our teaching staff, you know, that's when I guess I would be very alarmed. It's, you know, I agree. Kids need to be at school. This is the toughest thing I've ever had to deal with.
I guess I've got a couple things. First, any decision we make has consequences, as been mentioned a couple times. Like Scott said, you could argue against any of our options because people can be affected differently. One question I have for Julie and some of the administrators would be, with our kids that are quarantined at home, how many of those kids are quarantined because of exposures at school versus exposures in the community or at their homes? That is, having siblings and parents that have come down with COVID-19. Is it a 50-50? Is it 75-25 one way or the other? Or can we tell that? I don't need specific numbers. Just give me a ballpark. Julie, Mitch.
Jill, correct me if you think I'm wrong. And honestly, Paige would know for sure, but I believe that the majority are not from school. Our quarantines, it does happen because there are times, just as Pam mentioned, that students may be eating lunch together, but I think the majority of them have been a result of outside exposures, but it doesn't matter from our perspective. I mean, if they're quarantined from school, we still have to educate them. So that's kind of, I think, where our teachers were coming from in some of their comments about the numbers of quarantined students.
I understand that.
Think of what's going to happen in the future. You can't just look at the past, because we've got that Thanksgiving coming up, and that's what's going to be scary, I think. But I think that's scaring a lot of parents and teachers.
Which brings me to my next comment is that I know our staff is very concerned. We've got the same thing going on at the hospital with our hospital staff that are all concerned. But on the other hand, how many of those staff are actually going to travel out of town for the holidays yet? How many of them are going to host large Thanksgiving dinners, and yet they're afraid to come to school? So, I can argue both sides on that issue. As has been said earlier, we cannot control what our staff is doing on their time away. We can't say they have to be wearing masks all over, although the governor is starting to say that. So I'm concerned in those regards too. The other thing I look at strongly is, what about our at-risk kids? We've got a lot of kids that I'm really scared about online because, we got some families that, hey, they're going to survive no matter what. They're going to get their kids online. They're going to get them educated. They're going to help us. But we got a lot of other kids whom both parents work, have limited computer capabilities themselves. We can go all paper, as Jill said, but that scares me too. And that's why I'm looking at this and saying, any plan we do is going to have adverse consequences for a group of students, no matter what. We've got to look at that. If we talk about our metrics, we talked about our metrics at 2.5%, starting to institute other measures. And folks, we're not there yet. We're at 2.10 approximately, which is higher than we were a week ago, I will admit. Yes, we've got the 14-day positivity rate at 16.5, I think it was. But on the other hand, if you look at that, we're also county number 11 from the lowest. We've been doing some things right. There's still 25% of the school districts in this state that aren't requiring masks at all times for other students and faculty. And we've been doing that from day one. And our kids have been doing a great job of that. And our faculty have been doing a great job of that. And those are things that we have to applaud. Is it time now, or do we need to sit back and have another meeting next Friday and make some decisions? I'm not sure.
With the Thanksgiving break, I don't think we can wait. I mean, that Thanksgiving break is coming up, and that's a good time to make any change. So there's a couple days in between. We can't wait till next Friday. We need to make a decision with the Thanksgiving coming up. We need to make a decision sooner than that.
I understand this is a fluid situation, and it has been since the beginning, but I think Dr. Malhouse talked about it too. And when those metrics are in place for a reason on that. And I think if we start making a decision outside of these metrics, again, the metrics do no good. If that's the case, we shouldn't have the metrics out for the district and the public to see, because if we're going to make a decision before we hit that 2.5%, why even put metrics out to the district? I think, sure, something could happen over the holidays here, but I do feel that the metrics are out there for a reason. That I don't want to make a rash decision of picking a date now before we hit those metrics.
I just brought up yesterday's numbers. And, you know, if they keep shifting up like this every day, the best, what is the best strategy then? Is it to stay out? Is it to go into the hybrid mode, which would be the next step? Those still are difficult questions.
One thing to think about is that maybe Julie can talk about this, but if we go to online, what does that do to our food service program for kids that are free and reduced versus going to hybrid? I'm sure it would be much easier to maintain some of those services for kids if we're hybrid. Is that correct?
We go hybrid. We would do kind of what we did for 8th grade with regard to the lunch. They would just take home when they're at school. If we were to go virtual, we would do something similar to what we did last spring, grab and go situations. So that's kind of our plan right now, depending on the plan that we are following.
Okay, thanks.
One thing to just consider when we think about, you know, whether or not we need to wait or where we're at in it, whenever we do make that decision, so many of our families have childcare needs. And that will take some time for them to arrange and figure out. We also have our on-site BEAT program, which if we were to go all online, we need to make a decision whether or not to keep that program running, or if we're closing the buildings to also close that program. Same thing with Kids Club, that also provides childcare for our families in a hybrid model. We could see it doing some of the same before and after school care. But that just the amount of childcare in our community is small anyway. And so I think if we can give parents some warning in that, is the best we can. I mean, right, the best we can right now. But I think that's something just to consider when we think about the timeline of that decision that we make.
It sounds to me,
That's why I was kind of considering the Thanksgiving break being a good time for parents to be able to have 4 days to do whatever they needed, plus, you know, whatever. That's, again, why I was considering that might be a good time to make the change to whatever.
but that our absentee rate, we really don't know, because Scott just said that he's going to pull, let's say 40 kids off of the quarantine as of tomorrow. So that's going to knock that down by 40. That's probably going to take us at least 1/10 or 2/10 of the point down.
That won't affect
at that
that
time.
particular metric, Brian, because that's the quarantined with no symptoms. So that was,
Okay, so that's not that metric.
yeah, our metrics only look at illness. And
Okay, those
so
are illnesses. Okay.
I had simply shared the quarantined students that were not ill with the board, because I know that's something that
Okay.
staff had shared that they wanted to be shared with the board. So.
Okay.
And I do think in the quarantined without symptoms, that's where we perhaps notice some of that community spread effect. When we think about how, you know, probably 2/3 or 75% of what's in quarantine, those students are due to household exposures. And so as we see those numbers go up, I think it's reflective in our quarantine students, and that's where the teachers are feeling it, even if it might not be another ill student. They're definitely
Right.
missing from their classroom, and we see that with that community spread going up.
Yeah.
I know that we have talked about the Thanksgiving break and how to extend, if we extend, you know, a different setting after that. And I'm thinking, you know, we go into Thanksgiving break, the kids and staff are out for 4 days, and we come back in and we see a remarkable difference and put, you know, students and staff at a higher risk level. And then we go into, you know, Christmas, quote, Christmas break a few weeks later, where all that might just merge. And, you know, do we wait until maybe we're not done on December 22nd, but we're really done on December 10th or something like that? I don't know. Nobody knows.
I think
And,
something that the staff probably needs to hear today and wants to hear today is, I think there was a big push for online with that questioning because based on most of my conversations, people felt like that at our last board meeting, hybrid was taken off the table as an option. And so as we looked at our safeguards of where we may stair step to, the next thing, like where are we protected if we don't have that? And now we have to have online because everybody, for whatever reason, for whatever we heard or whatever we talked about, felt like that what if and when we decide that wasn't an option. So most staff feel like, I think if we're looking at, felt like, well, why did we take that option off the table? And whether it's a metric we put in there, decided to do it. And again, I know that situation creates, just like being at home creates kids at home, being hybrid creates kids at home. But I felt like staff felt like a safeguard was taken out from under them, and that if we needed to, we wouldn't utilize that it wasn't even an option. So I think even just from that standpoint, I think people need to hear what our options are and what we will use. And if that is an option, that we will use that to protect our teachers and make sure that we're staying safe. I think they need to hear that we are still considering all options to make sure that we won't put our staff in a situation where we aren't safe as much as we can control.
I guess I kind of like to hear from each board member if you know what you'd like to do right now, whether you'd like to do online, whether you'd like to do hybrid, or whether you'd like to keep it the way it is. You know, if I could, I mean, it's not a vote, no motion is on the floor. I just kind of like to know where everybody is. And my battery's getting low, so I'm going to run and get an extension cord.
I think,
I have a
let's wait until she
question.
gets back there.
Well, Brian, excuse me.
Go ahead, Pam.
I have a question for for Brad and Autumn. In our classroom cohorts, about what are the numbers for the class sizes, just to refresh my memory?
It depends on the classroom. So preschool, I have a preschool class of 12. Paige is a little bit higher. We're at 15 and 16. My TK is at about 12. My kinder is between 16 and 18. I don't think I have a 19 yet. And my first is between 20 and 23.
For me, second grade is 23, 24. Third is 19, 20, and fourth grade is 26 or 27.
Okay, Pat is back now, so let's see here. Pam, you were just talking, so I'll let you go first. And
Okay, because looking at the size of cohorts, I guess if I could look at this a certain way, I would say our preschool through fourth grade have a better control perhaps over the mixing of cohorts. And our 5th through 12, you know, have more activity, have more interaction, have maybe, I don't know about class size at that level for sure, but you know, it probably depends on the coursework. So if we go to a hybrid, we really do probably cut down on cohort sizes, which could be very helpful. So when 51% say they want to differentiate, that could be the differentiation. When 48.6% say everybody do the same thing, then I guess starting with the hybrid plan and, you know, not giving the impression that it's off the table at all would really cut down on the size of cohorts in the middle school and high school. That might be the best bet. When we do it is still a hard question to answer.
Okay, Jeremy?
I appreciate what Scott said about staff feeling like maybe we overlooked them a little bit. I hear a lot of staff concerns at home too. And I think I was a big part of that because I advocated for one or the other on-site or fully online. But when I really, mostly that comes from me, parents' perspective, thinking about arranging daycare every other day for my kids. A lot of our teachers or young families are in a similar situation, and we have some friends in Ames and other districts that have tried the hybrid thing, and it has not. The daycare and the scheduling is very difficult for families. But on the flip side of that, there's the safety concern for staff, which I think I personally overlooked a little bit, and I apologize for that. But when I look at the education kids got being fully online, I think some of the administrators have said that it poses a lot of challenges. So I like our kids to be in school. I would prefer them to be there every day. I think that if we needed to make a change, I would prefer the hybrid method. I like what we're doing, using a targeted approach for problem areas. I would like to maintain the 2.5% metric. And then if we need to make a jump at that point and move to a district-wide hybrid plan, I think would be my preference.
Matt?
Yeah, I think where I'm at is stick with the metrics of the 2.5% of where we're at. And then just based on looking at the survey that came back, I mean, like you said, everybody said you could slice this any different way, just because the sheer aspect of how they came back. But when you look at the family side of it, what was it, 66%, I think, preferred the district wide was the same. And I think based on listening to some of the principals here, just to being fair to all the staff and administrators of doing it district wide, I would say stick to the metrics of the 2.5. And when we hit to that point, move to a district wide hybrid situation.
And on the last one, I too am very much for sticking toward the metrics. I mean, yeah, we could prognosticate anything, what's going to happen in 10 days' time. I've learned in this, dealing with COVID now for 6 months' time in my position, I've learned that it's pretty hard to predict. I think that we put the metrics in place for a reason, and I think we need to stick to it. Hybrid versus online, totally. I can argue both ways. If you look at the study out in Des Moines Register earlier this week, they found no difference as far as academic between the hybrid versus online full-time. Unfortunately, they did not compare kids in the classroom every day. They were just comparing online versus hybrid. So I would go with either way as far as that goes, what the board decision would be. But right now, I don't think we can institute that or prepare to institute that until we know what's happening closer on. I would suggest that we make sure that our kids are informed that next Tuesday, to make sure that everyone takes their computers and their laptops home in case we have to make a decision over the weekend or during the holiday. I'd hate to have to, otherwise we'll have to open up for one day to get the computers, which is feasible, definitely, but might not be ideal. So I just think we have to be proactive. It's just like several districts are talking about going to online learning for the day that they have a snow vacation. And so they're just going to be telling their kids, hey, weather forecast looks bad. Make sure your computers come home with you that night. I think that's just some friendly advice we'll give next Tuesday in case we start hitting that 2.5. And maybe next Monday we hit that 2.5%, and then we're going to have to do something. But until I hit that, see that 2.5, I think we put those metrics out there for a reason. We made an adjustment to them last week because things have changed in the last 3 months' time pretty consistently. But now we're a new baseline. We have to follow those metrics.
Can we go ahead with a suggestion that as soon as it reaches 2.5, we don't meet again, that we let Julie move directly to the hybrid model without us having to meet again and delay it another day?
Would agree with Pat on that situation. As far as, I think once we hit that metric, I think that's when you apply for that waiver.
And give it a couple days in between, immediately go, maybe a day off or something, or they're working online at least one day for the teachers to have, some time to do something. And I think we can go 2 days or whatever without getting that waiver. So we have time to get that waiver as well. So maybe a couple days where they do go online until we can go back to hybrid once we get the waiver. Do we need the waiver to do hybrid? I don't think we do we? We don't
No.
need the waiver. Okay, so
No.
just, because we're still going 50%. So we don't need a waiver. So, but give them a day or so to still have the teachers prepare themselves and get ready.
And we also have the ability to go virtual for a few days, because if we're fully on site, the state law requires that we're on site for 50% of the time. So if we're on site for a whole week, you could technically be off in virtual learning for the second week and still not need the waiver, because you're still going 50% of the time. So I just think, back to what the administrator said, we definitely want to make sure we give our staff an opportunity to prep. And I think also our parents, at least a little bit of a heads up. I was in a situation last spring where we had that Sunday night when we had to call school off. I think you guys were in spring break. We did not have spring break. And so I was telling families at 8:30 at night that their kids weren't going to have school and no end in sight. And that was a very unpleasant experience. And I would like to avoid experiencing that again. So I think some kind of heads up to families and staff would be beneficial. And we could do that to some degree. So if that's okay, that's my main concern. Because if we hit 2.5, we aren't going to know till that day. And so, I mean, there might be a day or two where we were sitting at 2.5 and then switching.
Yeah, and I agree, Pat. That's a good idea. Julie can make that judgment call. She will know those stats maybe before we will. I'm sure she will.
Mhm.
I have to admit, I came into this thinking it was time to go back home for everybody to be safe.
Me too.
Because you're bombarded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the teachers need it.
Okay, well, we've had a great discussion here. I think we've got some ideas, but it sounds to me like what was talked about in the last few minutes that probably would require a motion.
Okay, so I will move, at least we've got to do something here. I will move that as soon as we reach that 2.5, that the parents and teachers and everybody are informed, that there be a day or two up to Julie as to how long they need to prepare and get ready to go to a hybrid model, and that we then go directly to the hybrid model without the board meeting again, but Julie informing us as to what's going on.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom, to authorize our superintendent, Mr. Tripa, to go to a hybrid model once we hit the 2.5% absentee rate, with included that there will be a 1 to 2 day transition period for the teachers to make those changes. Any further discussion?
I think we also need to make sure we let parents know about internet capabilities. The capability now, I think with MediaCom to get it for $10 a month is out there. Is that available for us anyplace?
How to actually, we investigated all of that, and the $10 a month will not give them the bandwidth that they need to do any kind of streaming, anything that we would do at the school level. It's going to be about $100 a month, and we actually, we've addressed the internet issues as best we can. The ones that are out there are situations where we can't even get internet to the home. They would have to like lay new.
Okay. But then we need to make sure that on the days that students are not in session, that there is, you know, availability for them to continue to work on their assignments and their homework.
We'll have to do it a different way for some of our families. And so that's part of what Joe is speaking to, that we need to make sure we're addressing, because earlier this year, we were able to address some of those internet issues. And so we know where our issues lie.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Brian, you made the mention that everybody should be prepared next Tuesday to take all their things home. And this year, our calendar doesn't have Wednesday as our first day off for Thanksgiving. So, you know, if
Well, we are
teachers
going to
get-
school on Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
are.
Okay,
And so-
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I'm sorry about that. Make it
Oh, no, that's
Wednesday.
okay. I mean, we
Since
have.
I don't have a,
I was
I don't have
gonna
a
say-
child in the district right now, so I don't follow the calendar quite as closely. I apologize for that.
Say, can we change the calendar? No, I'm joking now.
It might be Tuesday for some people, you never know. So I would start Monday reminding students.
Yeah.
Well, we hope those students do not travel. That's the big thing. We hope that we need to encourage. I was on the radio station yesterday for the community, encourage people to not be traveling and to stay home and have your family gathering just amongst those in your household. Limit things so you can have a great Christmas celebration. Otherwise, if you get a large group together at Thanksgiving, you may have another family event before Christmas, and that would probably involve a funeral. So, okay, there is a motion on the floor at this time. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. That motion does pass unanimously. I'm not going to ask for a roll call vote because I think it was very clear it was a unanimous decision. With that said, is there any other issues to be discussed today? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Mr. Elfin to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, folks, thank you very much for this lively discussion. I think we've got some direction here for the next couple weeks' time. I believe we'll reconvene as a full board in about 3 weeks' time. So thank you very much.